what's going on, people? This is Josh from A Photography Thing, where we kind of help photographers, creatives, pretty much the creative types, find their voices and help people discover their thing and then help people rock their thing. But enough about that. So what I wanted to do was start to, just not tell more of my story, like more like about me, but I want to open the relationship up or deepen the relationship between me and people that are interested in my work or just in photography or film in general. And I figure one of the ways I've been doing that, but I want to expand on how I'm doing that. So one of the ways I want to do that is show you photographs, show you photographers that have inspired me, photographers that I've discovered throughout the years. And it won't just be photographers either. It'll be graphic designers because I'm in a design, I'm in a film. So it'll just be like the creative types, people that have inspired me in some way. I figured I'd share with you some of their work, right? Maybe to put you guys onto some of these people, like if you don't know about them or if you had a little bit of knowledge about certain creatives, maybe this will inspire you to take your knowledge of them a little bit deeper and things like that. So this first photographer I'm going to talk about is one of the OGs. His name is Gordon Parks. He was really famous in, I think, the 60s and 70s. He did a lot of stuff for Life, Life magazine. He has some of the most iconic images that we've ever seen in the world of photography and film and fashion. I was drawn to his story. When I first got into photography 3 years ago, I found out about Gordon Parks, and I was always interested in his story. He has a documentary on something, but I saw it on YouTube for free. And I was interested in how he actually got into photography. So his story was he, as a young man, I got to look at the documentary again, but as a young man, he decided that he wanted to shoot fashion. Some kind of way it came about, he wanted to shoot fashion, but he didn't have any camera, he didn't have any equipment. So he, buckled his pants up and walked into this, I think some kind of like boutique or something like that, where it was this white couple who owned the boutique. And he went up to the man, he said, "Excuse me, Mr. So-and-so, I want to shoot fashion for you, right? If you get a couple of ladies for me or a lady and some dresses, I'll go ahead and shoot fashion for you." And the guy was upset at something else. It wasn't about Gordon, but he was already like clearly bothered and kind of shooed him away. But the wife said, let's say the guy's name was Gilbert. And she said, "Gilbert, how do you know he can't shoot fashion?" And he said, "I don't." And she said, "Young man, I'll have a model for you here tomorrow with some dresses. Come back with your equipment and we'll go ahead and shoot." Gordon was excited because he didn't really expect, especially back in like the 60s, the 50s or 60s, he didn't really expect this white couple to oblige him on something that he wanted to do. But he got to go ahead to do it. He went to his buddy's house because, remember, he didn't have any equipment, but he went to his buddy's house and asked him if he could borrow some equipment. His friend said yes, and then he went back the next day and shot it. Fast forward through the story, he did the whole roll of film, shot everything. And then at the end of the photo shoot, realized that he still had the lens cap on on the camera the whole shoot. It was something like that for the most part, but there was like one. I think he either had the lens cap on, or basically the film was damaged or was unusable or something like that. But he had one picture out of everything. He had one, so his heart was racing. He felt like he failed because he did fail. But when he went back to present the photos, the images to the couple or the wife, I think it was just the wife, he was like, "Here's the work," and he said something about the film being damaged or whatever, made it some kind of lie. But the one photo that he kept, the one photo that he had was so beautiful that the lady said, "Well, if all the other images that I'm not able to see are even close to this one, you've done an amazing job." And again, I'm paraphrasing. This is not the exact dialogue, but for the most part, that was it, and that's how we got his start. Fast forward years later, like he became again one of the most influential and famous photographers in the world. All right, so I'm going to show you 10 images from Mr. Parks. And initially, when I was looking up Gordon Parks, I was looking for some photos on Pinterest, and I was going to go over scale, like people in his images and how he uses scale, right, and composition and things like that to play, not to place them, because I was looking at a lot of like street documentary style photojournalism type images. He's done a ton of fashion, but I wasn't particularly looking at those yesterday. But as I started to look through, I saw another photo. I guess I'll pop it up. I saw another photo, which I've seen this before. And then it led me to actually, you click on the picture on Pinterest and it leads you to the actual website. So I'll leave a reference to the website I'm referencing all this information from. But it was very interesting. I got this from the Gordon Parks Foundation, and this is one of his exhibitions where he showcased this family. And excuse me for not saying the name, but it's something like the Fontanelles or something like that. That's their last name. And it was this family that he spent time with in Harlem. And basically, Life magazine wanted Gordon to show or showcase the poverty in like some of these inner city streets. And Gordon figured the best way he could do that was to actually spend time with the family and show how they lived. So he some kind of way got in contact with this family who was a real family from Harlem. And he spent the month with them. So what I found interesting too was the first week he spent with them, he didn't have his equipment, he didn't have any camera. He wanted to get to know them, right? So that by the time the second week came, I think they were calling him like Uncle Gordon, like he was practically part of the family. So it wasn't a big deal that he actually had his camera out. Like it was almost like unnoticeable. So as we go through these, I'll give you, and remember, this is all subjective, right? This is all just my opinion. Everything I'm saying could be 100% correct or it could be 100% incorrect, but it's still my opinion, which means it's not incorrect at all. I feel like there's always like a few layers to a photo. There's what actually happened. So you look at this photo, there's like what's actually happening with the family, the situation that they're in. And then there's Gordon Parks who takes the photo, right? That's another layer, right? The photographer takes the photo and then he takes the photo and then, edits it, does the edit, processes the film, right? That's another layer. And then the last layer is when people view the image. Right, so whatever people get from the image, no one is really wrong, right? Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Gordon Parks doesn't have a hang on 2 seconds. Pause. All right, you guys will have to excuse me. This is live, kids. I had a text that I had to answer back, but where was I? All right, and then there's the experience of the actual viewer who views the photograph, who views what really happened, who views the photographer's perspective and edit on what happened, and then there's the interpretation of the viewer. So you and I are the viewers at this point, so I'm just going to give you my perspective. Maybe we'll talk about lighting, we'll talk about shadow, this, that, and the other. But so let's get started. So after he spent the week with this family, he decided to go ahead and document their life experiences. So I think there's 25 photos in all in this collection. So I just chose 9 from this collection, and this is the first one. So I think this is one of the photos when they were in, I want to say some kind of like office, some kind of like welfare office. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it was, but this is the mom, and these are her 4 children. Right now, I guess to fast forward in the story a bit, this is real life. So if I'm not mistaken, the boys and the little girl, I forget what happened to each one, but I think 1 or 2 died from AIDS, and the other 1 or 2, however the breakdown is, died from like gang violence or like street violence, just growing up in Harlem. And this guy right here, Little Richard, is almost, not that he's the star of the show, but this is her pride and joy. They're all her pride and joy. But this little guy right here, Richard, is the only one who actually made it out of the ghetto. If you will, he made it out of the ghetto. He raised a really nice family. He actually became really good friends with Gordon Parks. He was really influenced by him. So he can't, not to this day because he's gone now, but I guess up until the day he died, he always referred to Mr. Gordon as like one of his best friends and his mentors and this, that, and the other. And Gordon had no idea he would impact this kid's life as much as he did. But I think that's one of the cool things about being an artist. Like, you never know who or how you'll inspire someone. So this is the family inside of the office, and I don't know if they're getting bad news, but I mean, you could just see from the expressions. I love photojournalism because it's so raw. It's a real moment, and you could just see on the expressions of the children that this probably is just a regular part of life. This isn't anything new. The bad news. Here's a little girl. Here's the mom. I mean, you can read everything in her face. I guess, just like what her mood is right now, how she feels right now. And here's little Richard, right, staying nice and close to mama. And in one of the pictures, she also mentioned that if just one of her children could make it out to be something, that she'd be thankful for that. So that is kind of a testament to like her mindset or her mood or her feelings at the time of how rough it had to have been for a poor African American family back in the 60s, right? So I don't know who she's talking to here, but this is, very interesting. If we look at the rule of thirds, the rule of thirds and the golden rule, this won't be like a really great grid, but it goes something like this, right? So a picture is broken down in this sort of grid, right? So we can look at the rule of thirds first. I think this picture is appealing for one, because this subject right here was closest to the lens is on 1/3 of the image, and then the family takes up 2/3 of the image. So this is very interesting, very pleasing to the eye. So in photography, quick side note, photography, it's a mixture of art and science, right? So it's good to know the science, the rule of thirds, composition, scale, perspective, this, that, and the other, how light hits and everything. And then everything outside of that is just art. It's all how you interpret the science or interpret the math, right? So, here he is in 1/3, right, facing the family, right, probably looking right at Mrs. whatever her name is, and this family is on the other 2/3 of the image. I also find this window interesting, right? You guys know I'm a black and white fan all day, and you can see that there's light coming in here, illuminating everything you see over here. And then I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that there is some kind of light that's illuminating the family. As you can see, it falls into shadow here. So I don't think there's a ton of light here, but as you can see here in the family, that their faces are illuminated, right? He has his head, this guy here has his head down, but their faces are illuminated. So I'm assuming that there's some type of light shining down from there. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm pretty right. And obviously this light is illuminating the background, and I love how some things fall into the shadows, and some things are illuminated. You can also sort of tell that there's no light coming in from this direction because his face is dark hair, or I mean, that may not be necessarily the truth, because she could be shielding whatever light from hitting his face, because he is pretty lit up from here. But this light could also be bounce light from the window, illuminating the whole place, and then the light could be bouncing from the wall onto his face. Her face is falling in the shadow here. What else do I find interesting? I also like triangles. Triangles are another thing that's important in photos and images, right? So not that it's a perfect triangle, but you can actually see a triangle here, which is appealing. So if you start to look at fashion images, like one of the reasons why they get super tall, lanky models to model clothing is because the tall, lanky models can make really interesting triangles with their arms, with their legs, with their body language, right? It's really all about, not all about, but triangles play a really important role in great imagery. Right, so I guess we spent enough time here, man. Let's move on to the next one. I gotta spend a lot of time on each photo, but I won't do that to you. I won't bore you. This is the mom and little Richard coming home, I'm assuming. What's up with where's my brush? Oh, okay. Excuse me. All right, so yeah. This is the mom with little Richard. Again, our pride and joy coming up the steps. I dig the little Chucks, little baby. I'll always get a kick out of little baby sneakers. I like this image because it shows so many layers. Like it's nothing. I always enjoy photographers who can give me a lot of information without it being too much information. So it's cool. This is very interesting. Obviously, she's coming from downstairs, right? But the fact that it's completely black, right behind her, you can't really make out what's happening down there. It's kind of interesting, right? Because she's coming up from the dark. I guess there's a child right there too. I see a little leg right there. One of the older kids, little Richard. I think he's looking up at us. I'm not sure, or looking up at Gordon, right? But this is interesting, right? The shadow that she's walking out of. And again, she's walking into light. There's probably a few lights as she walks up the steps, shining down, right? Some of that light is probably also hitting this the second floor. And then again, I'm interested in this photo too because it falls back in the shadow. So I don't know what's happening down here or back here, which is very interesting. Well, at least interesting enough. Oh, whoa! At least interesting enough to me. There we go. Obviously, I should say obviously, but this bike is very interesting because she's going upstairs, right? We don't know what's happening down here. We don't know what's happening up here. We know that there's probably some light here that's illuminating her and the stairs. And then there's this little tricycle down here. I just think that's classic, right? Could be, maybe it's not the kids. You may be too young to ride a tricycle, but maybe one of the other children's, or maybe not one of theirs at all. But it's just interesting to see, right? We have some cool leading lines, right? Leading from downstairs, and that gets cropped off, so we don't have that sense of like, you know, where that ends. Obviously, we know probably it ends at the top of the stairs, but these leading lines are pretty cool. They kind of draw the eye right to this subject right here in the middle, and I think it's cool too that the bike is in line with the subject down on the second floor, right? So that shows some interest as well. We have some more lines here, right? That obviously matches up with the bottom of the banister or whatever you call that. All right, so that's pretty interesting. Right, let's move on to the next photograph. The next. This is one of the older. I think this looks like the oldest child, the oldest boy. I think he passed away from HIV or gang violence. I'm drawn to this picture. Just look at this. I mean, you can just get a sense of what kind of environment this kid is living in. Just look at everything. Look at the wall. I mean, you can see that these are not really pretty textured walls with wallpaper. I mean, it's just the wall. You can see all kinds of blemishes on the wall, right? That tells a story. He's got a bed right up against the window. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I would probably imagine that the reason why he has it right up against the window is because there's no space in his little bedroom. I wouldn't imagine that he has a nice bedroom, right? You can see the thinness of the mattress. So I'm imagining this kid is not getting like the most comfortable sleep every night. Here's an old, tattered, beat up kind of like not classic blanket, but like this is like, I don't want to say homeless blanket, but I think you know what I mean. I'm not trying to be politically incorrect, but you know what I mean. This is like that old burlap looking kind of blanket. So he has one of those. And then he has a ton of clothes on. So this is like outside clothing, right? Outside clothing, but he's in bed under the covers, not going to sleep, but doing homework. So to me, I mean, this reads that this kid is doing what he's, supposed to do, doing his work. He's doing his work, but it's cold. He probably doesn't have a desk that he can do work on, so he does the work in the bed, or maybe he does the work in the bed because there's a blanket, right? He can keep warm, and if it was warm enough in the house, I'm sure he wouldn't have an outdoor coat on. So I'm just assuming that this kid is cold, but he's, doing what he's quote unquote supposed to do. He has some cool, what is that, arithmetic, right? Doing some of that. I hate math. It's got some traffic. Looks like a lot of work here too. Sheesh, this kid's working, and then he's writing in his notebook. The light. I'm assuming that there's probably a light clearly above his head. I think that there's more light here than there is hitting the wall. So I'm assuming the light isn't facing that direction. It's more coming down the downward angle, hitting him for the most part. I'm assuming. Again, this is just my perspective. I could be 100% wrong, but I don't care. It's my perspective. Yeah, so this is what I gathered from this photo. And I also love, which I also do in my photos, I love texture. So as you can see, not texture, I mean, you have the texture of the walls and things like that, but you also have the texture of like the film on the film, like these like white blotches and stuff like that, and these scratches and this dust. I love stuff like that, especially with black and white. It just gives it that timeless feel. I mean, this is the era of like black and white, but even to today, I put a lot of scratches and texture and stuff like that in my work because it just gives it that timeless feel. Boom. All right, moving right along. This is the husband. If I'm not mistaken, his name is Norman, and I mean, I guess, he's doing the best that he can as an African-American male back in the 60s. I shouldn't say the best that he can, but I mean, I kind of got to give him a pass. I mean, we don't have to talk about the 60s in the African-American urban experience, but I think this picture says a lot about how he was feeling as a man with 3 children, 4 children, is it? A wife, and they're struggling. I think, again, I'll leave the link in the description of where I'm getting my resources from. But I think he was laid off, right? And it was hard for him to find work. So ultimately, it was the mom that was carrying the family on her back. And, she wasn't making enough money, right? They barely had enough money for food. They stayed, they would huddle on a mattress as a family downstairs in front of the oven door and open the oven door for heat. And that's how they kept warm as a family and slept. And I think there were... was it 10? I want to say 10. I don't know if I'm mixing this up with another situation, but I want to say that there were 10 of them, 8 children, like the 2 parents and then 8 children. So you can imagine the kind of stress this man is under, by being unemployed and having these hungry children. And I remember reading that the mom will say things like she's gonna explode because there's always like a demand on her. Which, I mean, naturally, she has children, she has a husband, she's trying to find work. But could you imagine always having? We do have lives like this, but just always having to have an answer and provide something like now, not like a week from now, a month from now. Like now, it has to be done now. I would imagine that's a ton of stress. So I just see tons of stress. Like the eyes in a portrait, in my opinion, are one of the most important things. And you could just see from his expression, his mouth, that, things aren't good. And I'm not sure if, I'm sure this wasn't done on purpose, but I find this interesting because you can see his mood, right, on his eyes and like the tension that's in his mouth. And it's almost as if he's being suffocated, like he's behind this. I think this is just a window. It's probably just a reflection, right? You can see some lights and some things here. You can see the light shining. You see the highlights, specular highlights hitting them here. But it's almost as if he's trapped in this world. I think it's interesting that it's a piece of glass, which is almost like people's stories in life. It's like a prison. You're not in prison, but at the same time you are. So I find it interesting that he's clearly feels bad, feels in prison, feels helpless, and he's trapped behind this piece of glass. We can see him, he can see us, but I think there's a lot of hopelessness in this photograph. All right, moving on. This is one of the windows. There was actually another photo of Norman, the husband, stuffing rags into the window to keep the cold out. This is just a picture. I guess Gordon took this picture after the picture of Norman stuffing the rags in into the window. But I mean, look at this, man. This is not an easy life to live. Let's see what we have down here just for the sake. So we got some Comet. I love old stuff. So we got some old school Comet to try to keep the house clean. We've got a little ashtray, maybe smoker, a little jar with some water. I don't know if that was drinking water or something else. Maybe that's the cleaning water for the Comet. Who knows? And whatever this is, looks like some kind of shower cap in like an old can, something like that. Who knows? The windows, they don't look to be like the cleanest. I think this is like that kind of textured glass. But you can see, I mean, there's kind of all kinds of grit up here, grit up here. Got the old rags, which is probably could be some clothing that they have to use. And we have some towels hanging up, which I'm assuming are probably the family's towels. Bang, 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 bang. All naturally lit. Here's some more rags. I think that's a rag, trying to keep the cold out. Obviously this is all naturally lit from the window, so we get the nice soft light spilling out of the window, and these aren't illuminated. If these were illuminated, then I'd know that there's a light actually pointing in the direction of the window, but we just see the back is exposed because of the window, and then everything in front of the window is pretty much dark. Or especially these are illuminated a bit just because it's being hit by the that window light. Right, so I found that one interesting. Moving right along, this is one of the children, and she is cleaning the bathroom, and this is the bathroom. I remember Gordon Parks saying something to the effect that the mom would always try to keep the house feeling like warm, like trying to make it feel like warm. But he said at the end of the day, it was just a bunch of just rags and trash and just like filth that these people lived in. And as you can see in the bathroom, I believe what he's saying. So I mean, who knows why this is like this? I mean, it looks like we have some clothes hanging, some clothes drying, because I'm assuming they don't have enough money for a dryer. I find, obviously, we have some light from the window. And is this the same light? The same window? No. I don't know. Maybe that is the same window, right? Because we do have the rags hanging up. We have the line. We have the rags hanging up. I think that's the Comet. That's probably that jar. But look at everything. Look at everything else. And I know there's a light coming in from here. I think it's closer to the left. I mean, it could be directly in the middle, but I see this light here looks a little bit stronger than it does over here. Oh, squeeze me. Right. I find this leading line interesting. So we obviously have leading lines that's leading right to the young woman. Right. So from our vision, our point of view, right, we have everything leading to the window and this young woman that's cleaning the bathroom. For whatever reason, I find this hanger really interesting. Not really interesting, but I think that's interesting. Just more of the narrative, like, a hanger hanging up on some little piece of ledge in the bathroom with no clothes on it, but plenty of clothes and rags just hanging all over the place. You can see the condition of the ceiling isn't ideal. You can see that clearly. We've got something hanging out the hamper, this kind of like rusty bucket type of thing, newspaper, which is probably maybe soaking up water that spills on the floor, or maybe they use that for, you have a towel usually when you get out of the tub. Maybe that's what that's for. I mean, who knows? Do they have a dog? Is that a doggy bowl? I mean, maybe that's a doggy or cat bowl. A big cat or a dog bowl. But this is very interesting. She has this scarf on her head. I'm not sure if that's a khimar, which is something that Muslims use, part of their attire. So I'm not sure if that's what that is. I'm assuming that's what that is. We have this pile of clothes right here that's hoping to be washed. But very interesting photo. This kind of like industrial pipe right here. But you get a sense of how these people, like the emotion of this family. That's one reason why, I mean, I love photography, but like photojournalism, I love getting the real situation, or quote unquote real, because again, it's the three layers. There's what really happened, there's what the photographer captured at that moment, and then there's our perspective. This is the children playing outside right out in front of the apartment. So I don't know if this is the front door. I don't know what this is, but I mean, look at the conditions. I mean, this is not the most ideal place to live or to raise children. Here's the oldest guy. I think this is the kid that was doing the homework. He could be playing. I mean, he may not be making that face because he's cold or upset. He could be playing, but then again, maybe he is upset. This looks like little Richard, the little pride and joy, talking to big bro. And this is one of the other children. Let's check out the shoes. So, of course, most people had on Chucks. Shout out to Chuck Taylor. Chucks. Baby has on Chucks too. Yep. Shout out to Chuck Taylor. And the little girl, I think this little girl has on little penny loafers. Switched it up a bit. I've seen a lot of these hats in the urban communities back in the day. What is this? DUK? Maybe that's like I think this looks like a piece of material that's covering this this door, so we can't get we don't know what that really says. And I mean, this looks like it's just ready to fall apart. It's crazy. You get a little bit of reflection of what's happening through the window, and then this gate. Right, I like textures in photos too, not just textures on the photo, but that gate has a texture. This wall has a texture. Tons of texture on the ground, which is just pretty much a bunch of rubble. Let's see what's going on down there. A bunch of rubble, bricks, bottles, mostly bricks and rocks and rubble and stuff like that. But I mean, it's just horrible. And then what is this? Maybe like an old fridge that's doubling as like seating arrangements outside. But you can see, I mean, this is, you know, it's a little bit, I mean, not a little bit, I mean, it's sad, because you still have a lot of people that live like this. Here's like one of those buckets, looks like one of the buckets that was in the basement too. I mean, in the bathroom that we just saw, the door, or what's left of it, has holes, gaping hole right down here. But yeah, and then you know, what's interesting is that you have people to this day that's living like this, like people in third world countries and stuff like that. Like as Americans, we're really, 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 really blessed. Even the people that are poverty stricken in this country still have it a lot better than people that are poverty stricken in these third world countries. So I mean, you always got to be grateful for what you have. But either way, this is hard to deal with. I mean, no matter, and I think the reality is, no matter how hard it is for another family in the third world country, if you and your family are struggling, I mean, it's just never a good feeling. Like, you don't gain a lot of joy from knowing that someone else is doing worse than you. This is the little guy right here. We've got one more picture after this. This is little Richard right here with the little snaggle tooth, Toof, the little snaggle tooth. Let's go ahead and blow this up. Excuse me. Right, and he's a baby, so I'm sure he's not fully aware of like the whole situation. But I mean, kids know when things aren't great, I'm gonna put it like that. And I think just like with his father and his mother, you can see the expression in his eyes of and in the mouth of just how things are going for this family. I mean, you can see this is a shirt. I mean, he's got stains on it. I'm assuming that he doesn't wear this once and then gets it washed. I don't know that, but I'm assuming he probably wears this over and over and over again. And I would say out of everyone, he probably has it the best just because he's the baby. And if that's the case, and you see the wear and tear and just the exhaustion in his eyes. I mean, that paints a picture. So we got tons of shadow in this photo. You know, I'm a fan of shadow. I'm assuming that he's being lit by some window light that's off in the distance, just illuminating light this way. The reason I say that is because this part of his face falls off into shadow, and I'm pretty sure it's natural light because I don't think Gordon Park had a bunch of studio lights in this house. But I can also tell that it's a soft window light because of the the gradient, or how it kind of fades into pitch blackness. It's not just like a stark contrast where it's like bright on this side and then just super contrasty on this side. There's a gradual decrease in light, and by the time it hits about this point, it's just pitch black. It falls into the shadow. So I know that he's being lit from his left, our right, and there's no light coming in for it. Now, I would say, you know what? I was going to say that that there could have been a light back here that's illuminating this, but this could very well be the window light that's falling behind him as well. That's why this stuff here is lit, and I'm assuming that it's just going behind him and also spilling into the background, lighting that up. So I'm pretty sure it's just one light that we're seeing here. And again, really nice texture, right? Like the scratches of the dust that's on the film. Great photo. And last but not least, I just thought this one was interesting too, because Gordon Parks mentioned something to the effect that this, even though she knew how hard it was, like this, and this is not to say anything against religion or anything like that, but this was her hope. Even though everything was messed up, the home was messed up, the family situation, everything is just to the pooper, she still had hope in Jesus. And I find this picture interesting, not just because it's an old picture of Jesus, but because it's right over top. It's almost like this picture is just covering a big hole in the wall, which says so much, which speaks so loudly as far as this family situation. Like, she has hope. She probably prays every day, probably goes to church, yet this wall has a huge hole in it, and I'm pretty sure roaches and all kinds of things that go bump in the night are crawling through these holes. And this picture is her, I guess, a metaphor of hope, but in reality, it's just covering up this hole and doing the best that it can covering up the hole. But all in all, the situation is still fudged up. Fudged. I didn't say the other word. I wouldn't say that. It's Jesus is watching. But yeah, I mean, that's my take. I mean, if you guys are still here, I hope I didn't bore you guys too much, but maybe I'll cut it down, maybe do a little bit shorter. I may, cut it down to 5 or 4 or 3 and just spend a little bit more time on each one instead of going through 9 or 10 images. But this is my first one. I hope you guys found some value in this. Again, I'll leave the description, the reference, the Gordon Parks Foundation exhibition, the series. I'll leave that in the description where you can go ahead and look through the photos and look at the story and the narrative yourself. If you found this interesting, or if you had a certain picture that you found interesting, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Let me know what your favorite picture was and how you interpreted it, what your interpretation was of the photo, and we'll see if we think alike, or if you have a fresher or different perspective of the image. Right? So again, this is Josh of A Photography Thing signing off. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will see you guys on the next video. Adios, my friends. Be well.